I just finished up with Hijacks. I just finished up with Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. It is Brandon Sanderson's debut novel, right? And I've had this book for a couple months. Haven't jumped into it. Jumped into it a while back, and really I've been out of reading for a little while. And this was the first time in a few months that I've really gotten pulled into a book and really wanted to know what happened next. So let's jump into my review, my pros and cons and rating of this book. Premise-wise, Elantris is based around a former city of gods that has fallen apart, and now the country is ruled by merchants and is essentially a shadow of its former self. As the book opens up, there is a religious incursion going on and a religious conquest of the world by the religion known as the Durethi faith. I think that's the name. There's a couple different names for it. They follow the god Shudereth. Anyway, it's complicated. Moving on. What's up, guys? Just editing here, and I wanted to add in while I was on the topic of plot for Elantris. Even in his early books like this, Sanderson is still very, very good at laying out groundwork for what's going to happen in the future and putting everything in place. You know, he doesn't really have any Deus Ex Machina moments in any of his writings that I've explored thus far. And his foreshadowing is just really well done, not only in Elantris, but in all of his books that I've read. Back to the main video. We're immediately introduced to who I would view as our three main characters. Raoden, the crown prince of Elantris, our primary kingdom. Serene, the princess of Teod and soon-to-be bride of Raoden. And Hrathen, a Gjorn, which is a high-ranking member of the faith of Shudereth. And he is there to convert the people of Elantris in order to save them from military conquest. As far as plot goes, I think Elantris is fantastic. The plot of Elantris is very interesting. I wanted to know what happened next at every point in the book. He does a really good job of giving you that sense of curiosity and making you want to know what happens next. You want to turn the page. You want to figure out where this is going. You want to understand. And I think that is helped along a lot by the fact that Raoden, one of our main characters, is spending a vast majority of the book trying to figure out what is going on. There's also a lot of political intrigue and back and forth. I shouldn't say a lot. It's a strong part of Serene and Hrathen's arcs. I'm not personally a huge fan of political intrigue. I mean, it's just not my taste, but I think it's fairly well done here. A little bit of what detracts from this book, despite the fascinating plot, is you can very much tell the difference between Brandon Sanderson's writing then and Brandon Sanderson's writing now. They are not on the same level of quality. For one, Elantris comes across as very simplistic. The characters are pretty straightforward. Even Serene, who's supposed to have this troubled backstory, I personally just wasn't buying it. I've heard a lot of people like her, but I like the character, but her backstory just wasn't all that interesting to me. Her insecurities weren't all that interesting to me. Hello? Did you want to be in the video? Well, yeah. Raoden also, his story wasn't particularly interesting. I felt like Sanderson missed an opportunity to have some really emotional, hard-hitting things between Raoden and the king, his father. But it just really wasn't there, and it never really landed. This book wasn't a book that really hit me on an emotional level very much. It just hit me more so in curiosity and wanting to know what was going on and what was going to happen next. And some exciting revelations behind the lore of the of the world. The most interesting character, and I think probably my favorite character at that, would be Rathan, who is one of the primary antagonists of the story. He is the only character who really thinks very much about what he is doing, why he is doing these things, whether those things align with his views. He's the only one who really has much development, really. I mean, and I don't particularly think Raoden and Sereni need development necessarily. I think lots of reviewers can overemphasize the importance of development in characters. Sometimes the characters, they just come into it good. They're pretty set on what they need. They don't always have to go from humble farm boy to world shattering wizard. You know what I mean? It doesn't always have to be that. And I think Raoden and Sereni serve their purposes fairly well. I think Sereni could have used with a little bit more character development, but it wasn't a major hindrance from the story. And as far as characters go, Rathan was the one who had that arc of development and was the more interesting character. Avoiding spoilers, also a big villain who appears towards the end of the book was also pretty fascinating and really interesting. I really enjoyed his reveal. So the characters were good, not great, not overly interesting, but also not terrible. And they were fairly well written for what they were. I did have a little bit of a problem with the ending. For one, there are just so many nick of time saves. I think nick of time saves are great. The only problem is we always know they're coming, right? And that takes a lot out of it. If there's one or two in a book and you know they're coming, but you're still trying to figure out how is this going to happen? How are they going to save this person? How's that going to work out? I think that still works out, and that's still interesting. But there were just too many at the end of this story. Also, there was a little bit of inconsistency in sort of the combat power logic of the story to me. I don't really want to give examples, tread on spoilers, But something I really value personally as a reviewer within books, stories, video games, TV shows, whatever you want to talk about, any type of story, is consistency in the logic, especially when it comes to combat. For a non-spoiler example, I watched the TV show Supernatural. Supernatural, while a good show, does irritate me a great deal with its inconsistency in combat, where these two guys who have done things like, gone in the hand-to-hand combat with angels, get their face beat in by a much lesser threat. And the inconsistency of that bothers me. I feel like towards the end of this book, when there's quite a bit of conflict, this story has a tendency to do that a little bit as well. Whereas someone who should not win a fight, I don't think, ends up winning it, and ends up winning it quite impressively. Now, that being said, it does seem to imply that there is more behind those victories than meets the eye. And if this were a series that would go on to elaborate onto how these people were able to do these things, I think I would be more willing to forgive that. But it is not. It is a standalone book, and therefore I think that is a problem. But not a major one. It was a minor annoyance, but didn't detract from the book too much. Which is why I would say this book is good. It's a good book. It's not a great book. It's not particularly impressive, and it's fairly simplistic. You can really tell that this is Sanderson's debut novel, or that he is a younger writer, I should say, at the time that this book was written. It was written in 2005, so that's 15 years ago. When you compare it to his modern works, the writing and storytelling is not on the same level, but it is still good and it is still worth reading. So if you enjoy Brandon Sanderson's writing, and especially if you just enjoy a easy, enjoyable read, then I 100% recommend this book. I'm going to go ahead and give it probably a 7 out of 10. Remember, 5 is being average, 7 is good. Okay, so 7 out of 10 for Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. I appreciate all of you watching. And until my next video, peace out, y'all.